Good afternoon, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to this special address which we are having by the Honorable Harjit Singh Sajjan, Minister for National Defence, Government of Canada. Honorable Minister, sir, it's a great honor for us to have you here with us. And I would especially acknowledge and thank the High Commissioner, His Excellency Nadir Patel, and his team at the High Commission for making this possible, sir, and being with us on this event. Minister, sir, it's with special pride that we welcome you here, not just as the Defence Minister, but as someone who has served his country and his community, first of all, both as a soldier and as a police officer. For those unaware of it, let me recall that the Honourable Minister has been a combat veteran. We have many combat veterans here sitting in the front rows. And the Honourable Minister himself has been a combat veteran who retired as Lieutenant Colonel in the Canadian Armed Forces. And he has seen active service in hotspots such as Bosnia and in Afghanistan. Surely wars can't get worse than that. He was first deployed in Bosnia-Herzegovina, where he was wounded in conflict. Following this, he began an 11-year career as an officer of the Vancouver Police Department, where he worked as a detective with the gang crime unit, specializing in organized crime, and he's very well remembered in Vancouver still for his tackling of gang violence and organized crime in that area. But then he took leave of duty from the Vancouver police to return to being a soldier and went on to serve 3 separate deployments to Kandahar, Afghanistan. And this was the time when he was deployed in Kandahar, when Taliban activity had seen a sudden resurgence, and he found himself in the thick of it all. To date, he remains a very modest man. He will not talk about it. He will not say anything about the work he did there. But the fact is that his leadership at a very troubled time in the Kandahar province has been officially described as, and I will quote here, nothing short of brilliant. And for these services, he consequently received numerous recognitions. I must especially mention the Meritorious Service Medal, a decoration received for reducing the Taliban's influence in Kandahar province, and the Order of Military Merit, which is one of the military's highest decorations. So welcome, sir. It's a great privilege to have you with us. Canada and India share the deepest people-to-people connect, a connect that all of us are actually a part of. We all have family living in Canada. I myself have family. And a person like you, sir, having been born in Bombali village of Hoshiarpur district, are very much part of this connect. Today, Canada is home to over 1.5 million persons of Indian origin, who not only comprise more than 3% of its population, but hold key positions in business, in civil society, in public service, and the highest levels of government, of which, sir, you are a shining example. Therefore, traditionally, even in times of differences, bilateral relations between Canada and India have been close, comfortable, and strong. They've underscored a robust political, technological, and economic understanding that has been buttressed by this very vibrant cultural and community linkages that exist between our two countries. And these bilateral relationships have been taken to the next level by acquiring the status of a strategic partnership when Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Harper met in Ottawa on 15th April 2015. That was a phase that began what has been described in the joint statement as the new vigor and new steps which arose in these relationships. And it was then agreed that terrorism, extremism, radicalization, things which you have personally experienced at such close quarters, presented security challenges to the peace, stability, and prosperity of the two countries and of humanity as a whole. So the time is now ripe to realize the true potential of this partnership. And for firsts, I think, we can work together to bring stability in fragile and volatile states, wherein we share common knowledge and common understanding. One obvious region which suggests itself is Afghanistan, a country that the Honorable Minister himself has experienced at first hand. If any commodity has been in short supply in this region, it has been security. The rise of quasi-states as instruments of terror, coupled with the continued covert support of terror by some states, and the globalized threat of radicalism, both online and offline, that is something which has become staple for us every day. At the peak of the war in Afghanistan, Canada deployed over 3,000 soldiers in the region. The Canadian Armed Forces concluded their mission in Afghanistan in 2014. However, Canada has continued to contribute to the peace process in Afghanistan through extensive humanitarian and development assistance. It has been at the forefront, building trust, digging wells, rebuilding schools, giving humanitarian assistance to that country. And India, for its part, has always believed that the one solution and that the solution of Afghanistan, if it is required, it cannot be security alone. So we are keen to work on any peace process that is Afghan-led and Afghan-centered, centered around the lives of the people and the livelihoods of the Afghan people, rather than around the geopolitical ambitions and calculations of the powers around it. So India too has had an extensive economic diplomacy program to further the peace process, having pledged about $1 billion in 2016 alone by way of development aid, medicines, etc. to Afghanistan. And once again, as the storm clouds gather, as nations committed to peace, the time is ripe for a joint India-Canada-Afghanistan initiative, which moves beyond military solutions to create a holistic framework for the betterment of the Afghani people, and which looks at ways of reconnecting the economic lives of people in the region with the region and with the world as a whole. And leading from this, another area of mutual cooperation that arises relates to extremism. India and Canada have a joint working group on counter-terrorism and national security advisors dialogue. There is the ever-present menace of online radicalization. There's a lot that our two nations can do to combat this through cooperation on cybercrime and cybersecurity. On the commercial side, there is scope for increasing cooperation between our nations. Canada has a highly capable defense industry that is actively seeking business opportunities and partnerships around the globe. India's defense ties with Canada yet may be at the nascent stage, but we certainly stand to benefit from your nation's technological skills, your considerable aerospace technologies, simulation and modeling technologies, the cold climate experience in warfare, your culture of research and innovation. All are areas that suggest possibilities whereby Canadian defense manufacturers can become an active part of the Make in India initiative. And that is what we really look forward to. Then there is the whole gamut of Indo-Canadian naval cooperation, the theater of the Indo-Pacific, which actually brings our countries close together. To this end, whether it is the Bay of Bengal to the east, or the Pacific beyond, or the Indian Ocean on the south, joint training exercises and drills between the two navies will have immense tangible benefits. These exercises could nurture partnerships and an understanding that could pave the way for Canada becoming part of the supply chain for naval technology for Indian ships and submarines. An important agreement of Prime Minister Modi's visit had been the strengthening of the civil nuclear partnership between the two countries. Post-1974, 45 years after Canada banned all exports of uranium and any nuclear hardware to India, the two countries signed in 2015 a $350 million contract with Cameco to purchase uranium concentrate over the next 5 years. So moving forward, Canada's engagement with India's nuclear sector is going to play an instrumental role in India's comprehensive energy and national security as well as its economic ambitions. So that is why we value this relationship. This is not the place to talk about the expanding economic relationship between our nations in areas as diverse as energy cooperation, oil and gas, etc. There's a lot which is being done there, a lot which can happen there. But over the past few years, bilateral FDI inflows between India and Canada have grown significantly. And during the visit in 2015, there were 16 commercial agreements signed by Canadian and Indian companies, which have led to a 40% increase in the FDI inflows into India, and certainly more is expected in the coming years. So as I said in the beginning, India and Canada share a deep and emotive people-to-people connect, and therefore it is inevitable that this connect bring us ever closer together in our joint economic prosperity and national security. With that, I would like to invite you, sir, to take the floor and address us.
Mr. Joshi, directors, thank you very much for this kind invitations, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It is, I can't explain to you what a privilege it is to be here in India and speaking to all of you in this capacity. If I can share with you a story. When I was born in a small village of Bambeli, my grandfather had my hand read when I was a young child, and he used to tell me the story many times. And he said, 3 things are going to happen to you. And that one is you are going to go far away, like go outside of India. And at that time, it wasn't, we were a small farming family. How could that happen? And so I guess that's true, considering I grew up in Canada. The other one he said is you're going to marry a girl of your own choice. And 25 years later, I have married a beautiful Indian girl who's born in Vancouver, and we have 2 beautiful children. And but our parents were involved with the decision afterwards as well. So that became true. And then he also, actually those 4 things. And third thing he said is there's going to be a life-death experience as well. That something's going to happen, either he's going to survive or he's not. And there was a break in the line, and so I was electrocuted when I was about 4 years old in our village, and I survived that. My mother still complains about my dark complexion because I got electrocuted. The rest of my family is lighter skinned, and I've been close to death many times in combat. That's just the part of being a soldier. I'm hoping that's the last of that. We've proven that one. And the third one, so the final one was that you're going to be very wealthy, okay? So I'm still waiting for that one, for monetary means. But having said this, but the wealth that I've been able to achieve with a wonderful family and having an opportunity to serve my country as a police officer and a soldier, and now as a Minister of National Defense and as a Member of Parliament, there is no greater wealth than this. And now for opportunity for me to give back as well. So I'm truly honored to be here with all of you today. As I stated, this trip is a bit of a homecoming for me. It is my first trip to India since being sworn in as the Minister of National Defense of Canada by Prime Minister Trudeau in November 2015. And as I stated, I was born in a very small village of Bambeli in the district of Hoshiarpur. And my parents immigrated to Canada when I was 5 years old in 1976. And my father was a member of the Punjab Police Force at that time, but he made a choice to make a life in Canada. And I can tell you, every memory that I have of my childhood is a happy one, and very fond memories. And looking forward to going back to where I was born. And actually, not just where I was born, but actually in the house where I was born as well. And just kind of set this into context as well. So coincidentally, I might be the Minister of National Defense today, but there's a small town in Ontario, there's a gravesite there with a headstone of Private Bookham Singh, one of 11 Indian origin Sikhs who joined the Canadian military to fight in World War I. And he was injured and then buried. And just coincidentally, when I was a commanding officer and went to his Remembrance Day ceremony, that Private Bookham Singh was from Malpur. And Malpur is a town very close to my pind as well, and so his village is very close to Malpur. It's just a very coincidence that you might see me as a minister, but it was because of pioneers like Private Bukam Singh and many others who really made it possible for somebody like myself to be in this position today. So I cherish my memories and my Indian roots, and I use every opportunity to teach my children about their heritage. As much as I'm proud of my heritage, I'm also extremely proud to be Canadian as well. And I've served Canada in many different roles, as mentioned earlier, as a police officer in the gang crime unit in Vancouver, where I was tackling organized crime and drug violence. I also served as an officer in the Canadian Armed Forces, served in Bosnia and 3 combat deployments to Afghanistan. And I only say the following is to highlight some tangibles is I was decorated both by the Canadian and the U.S. military, so for my actions in fighting terrorism and the Taliban in Afghanistan. And today, I'm extremely proud to serve as a member of Parliament for Vancouver South and to be Canada's Minister of National Defence. And it's with the great opportunities Canada has presented me, so it gives me great pleasure to say that I was born in India, and I'm very proud of that fact, which is something that I've highlighted everywhere I've gone, and it has opened many doors for me as well. So ladies and gentlemen, but I'm also no stranger to conflict, and your organization here does some tremendous research on how to prevent conflict, to understand it better. So on my first deployment to Kandahar in 2006, I was kind of thrown into an unforeseen situation, and I became the architect of an operation called Operation Medusa, where we removed about 1,500 fighters, Taliban fighters, off the battlefield. And I was very proud to be on the main assault of that one of the force. But even though I was recognized for my efforts, there's one question that always nagged me. How did the Taliban become so large after the defeat in 2001? So it turns out we did not address the root cause of the original problem that brought them to rise. So the work that I undertook in this field over the years afterwards has given me considerable knowledge in this aspect. So knowledge that I'm now bringing with me as a Minister of National Defense, and it gives me a very unique perspective on modern conflicts. So I'd like to take a moment to pay tribute to your foundation's work in the area of defense and security. So it's a true privilege for me to be here with all of you, some great minds, thinkers with all your experience, for helping to create policy that will make our both countries better. And given India's importance in the Indo-Asia-Pacific region, this trip is an important opportunity to build and strengthen our bilateral relation, especially as it relates to defense. And now I am exploring working together in areas of naval cooperation with the Indian military on cold climate warfare, joint exercises, counterterrorism, and sharing advances in defense research and innovation. I'm also interested in opportunities for Canada's defense industry to develop closer ties with India. And this is an area where we can benefit from each other's expertise. As Canada's Minister of Defense, I believe strongly that collaboration among partners and allies is crucial to strengthen global peace and security. In this respect, Canada and India have a strong foundation on which to build. Our countries have significant people-to-people ties and have enjoyed long-standing bilateral relations. A relationship based on shared values and traditions such as democracy, pluralism, and respect for the rule of law. Canada and India are also important trading partners in sectors ranging from agriculture and education to entertainment and energy resources. The strategic partnership between our nations is evident given the many recent visits that my cabinet colleagues have made in the past year. And Prime Minister Trudeau and Prime Minister Modi have also engaged in dialogue, including at the Nuclear Security Summit in Washington last year. These high-level engagements speak volumes about Canada's recognition of India's importance in today's dynamic security environment. India has made major contribution to peace operations by sending battalion groups, engineers, medical teams, observers, and staff personnel on some of the most challenging peacekeeping missions in history. Indian troops have served in Cambodia, Sierra Leone, Rwanda, Ivory Coast, Western Sahara, and several other key places. And in fact, I had the pleasure of meeting several Indian peacekeepers in Goma last summer, and I was inspired by their experience and valued the insight they provided me during my brief conversation. And over 220,000 Indian troops have participated in United Nations peacekeeping missions more than any other country. So your contribution is remarkable. But it has come at a great cost. Unfortunately, 165 Indian soldiers have made the ultimate sacrifice in support of peace. And the international community is forever indebted to them for their sacrifice. Like India, Canada has also a proud tradition of peacekeeping, dating back to Prime Minister Lester B. Pearson. And some 120,000 Canadians have served in more than 50 UN operations from Cyprus to Cambodia, and more recently in the Democratic Republic of Congo, Haiti, and South Sudan. It was Pearson who first promoted the creation of a UN-led peacekeeping force in 1956 to resolve the strife in the Suez Canal, an achievement that earned him the Nobel Peace Prize 60 years ago. But ladies and gentlemen, the peacekeeping of yesterday no longer reflects the changing nature of conflict today. Today's missions are often undertaken where there is no peace to keep. These missions are more about peace support and the protection of civilians than they are about traditional peacekeeping. Modern peace support operations take place in complex and hostile environments where belligerents are often not identified, civilians are being targeted, and arms, drugs, and people are being trafficked. It is no secret that peace missions are under strain as well, nor is it surprising that the United Nations has requested that countries with advanced militaries play a larger role. And in Canada, we understand that evolving conflicts abroad have a real impact on our national security and Canadian interests, and many other countries do as well. So we in Canada cannot be an island of stability in an ocean of turmoil. So since forming government, Prime Minister Trudeau has committed Canada to multilateralism, and more strongly than ever in many years. We have pledged troops and have launched our new Peace and Stabilization Operation Program worth $400 million. Our commitment also includes an increase of up to 150 police officers deployed to support UN operations. And our commitment doesn't end there. Canada will also be hosting the United Nations Peacekeeping Defense Ministerial Summit later this year. Canada has not only contributed to peace operations, we had many hard-fought battles in Afghanistan for over 10 years. And Canada continues to make valuable contributions to several international missions currently today, including in Iraq, the Ukraine, and soon in Latvia. In addition, Canada has been involved in the counter-ISIL core group, where 13 nations come together and look at how we're going to be tackling the greater threat of ISIS. And we make significant contributions, have evolved, and our approach has evolved from a strategic military one to a more comprehensive government approach as well. We know that military might alone will not resolve modern conflicts today. Conflict prevention requires a deep understanding of the root causes of the conflict. It is not enough just to send soldiers. The military buys us time to allow diplomacy and development to work. We also need to address the social and political factors that allow conflicts to fester in the first place. That is why Canada's approach to conflict prevention and peace support is a whole-of-government effort. We believe we need to understand the fundamental causes of conflict and learn from the experts who are working directly in the field. We also must be frank about what is working and what is not working, and consider innovative approaches to international peace operations. Now, in terms of innovative approaches, let me reiterate that the military alone will not be able to deliver security and restore a country to a peaceful state. I firmly believe that non-government organizations, international organizations, and business community are playing a very important role in conflict zones, and we can learn much from their experiences and perspectives. I also feel strongly that we need to empower women in conflict and involve them in decision-making in security matters. I know this is an area where India excels. and I applaud India for deploying the first unit composed entirely of female police officers in the UN mission to Liberia. We also need to support younger generations in their education and eventually in their gainful employment. This is a particularly important case in Africa, where close to 60% of the population is 25 years or less. So by working to address the root causes of conflict, by engaging other nations to work with us, and by supporting initiatives ranging from training to humanitarian assistance, development, and education, we can maximize our contributions and increase our chances of success. All of these things are needed today to achieve international peace and security. Now let me say a few words about Canada's efforts to renew our defense policy. Our government has been engaged in some deep thinking about priorities and objectives over the past year. We recently undertook a comprehensive review of our defense policy to address emerging peace and security challenges, both at home and abroad. The review was rigorous and evidence-based, involving unprecedented consultations with Canadians, academia, experts, Parliament, and our allies. Consultations of this magnitude have not taken place since the 1990s. This process explored three key topics. The first was to examine the main challenges to Canada's security. The second, assess the Canadian Armed Forces' role in addressing threats and challenges now and into the future. The third area we looked at was at what resources and capabilities would be required to effectively tackle these challenges. The input we received from consultations and our analysis of these key questions has informed a new policy approach that reflects a vision Canadians have for our country and where it is going to be heading into the coming years. A policy that responds effectively to both the challenges and opportunities inherent in the world now and into the future. And now I am in the process of finalizing Canada's new defense policy, which I will be soon releasing in the coming months. So in closing, let me restate that the importance of a cooperative approach in building a more stable world, and doing this with allies and partners that share our interests and values. This is especially true in the Asia-Pacific, a region that has great importance to both Canadian security and prosperity. Canada's innovation agenda and strengths in the defense and security sector can easily be overlooked. We are a humble nation, and one that seems far away from India, but Canada is much of a Pacific country, and we are back on the world stage and ready to make a difference. I firmly believe that Canada and India have much to offer in terms of defense and security. We share a commitment to peace support operations and conflict resolutions. We live in societies that are diverse and built on pluralism, democracy, and the rule of law. And ladies and gentlemen, this is my first trip to India as a Minister of National Defense, and I can assure you it will not be my last. And I look forward to taking your questions and diving more deeper into some of the root causes of conflict and what we're going to be doing. Thank you very much for this wonderful opportunity.
So as the Honourable Minister has kindly agreed to take a few questions, I have two important announcements for you to bear in mind. One, please, it would be appreciated if you stick to the theme of the talk today, which is peacekeeping and conflict resolution in the contemporary international environment. And for the media personnel here, I think the Honourable Minister will be addressing media later on at 5 o'clock, so I think that should allow them a separate entry point into his viewpoint. So I think they should leave the floor open for others to examine some of the contentions here. So with that, I think we have three questions, individuals who were pre-identified. So let me start with them, and then we'll take another round. So Stefania?
Yes.
Yeah.
Good morning. My name is Stefania Benaglia, and I represent the Italian think tank Istituto Affari Internazionali. I gather from the news that during your visit you will be meeting a lot of industry leaders and business. So my question is, what are your expectations on your visit, and how do you envisage Canada to position itself vis-à-vis the competitive Indian defense market? Thank you.
I didn't hear the last bit of the question. What are the expectations of my visit and the last bit of your question?
How do you envisage Canada to position itself vis-à-vis the India defense market, which is quite a competitive
Oh,
one?
I see. My visit here is about, it's very important for, I realize is nations don't build relations, people do. And so it was very important for me to come personally, to come to India and build this relation directly. It is no secret that our Prime Minister rightfully says many times that he has more members in his cabinet and caucus of Indian descent than Prime Minister Modi does. And there is no also a secret that many cabinet ministers have made visits here to India. And we have a great opportunity to build on the great work from a defense relationship perspective. We haven't had the same level of relationship because of, I guess, competing priorities and the challenges that you face here in India and in Canada. But we wanted to move things forward. I think Canada can provide a lot of value in terms of our own experience, but India also has tremendous experience in conflict resolution that we can work cooperatively on. Plus, but more importantly, our defense industry provides some significant capability to other nations, but it doesn't have the same level of significance here in Canada. There are some great companies that are doing some good work here, and I want to be able to move on that so we can highlight some of the great work that our Canadian defense industry has done. So we're moving towards a direct relationship of reciprocal training, and also some defense innovation as well, but also looking at moving forward on our defense industry relationship as well. Thank you.
I think Geeta Mohan was...
Hi, Geeta Mohan from NewsX. My question to you is your experience fighting the Taliban. We have a bigger problem today, that's the ISIS. In terms of fighting the ISIS and the terrain that we're looking at, West Asia and Afghanistan, what is it and how can the world, the global community come together in fighting the menace of ISIS? Second part of my question would be on the fact that there are concerns that India has when it comes to extremism and terrorism. There are stands that have been taken with regards to one of the biggest concerns that India has that has to do with Khalistan and the Khalistani movement. Your stand and what do you think of India's concerns regarding Khalistani terrorists?
First of all, the direct threat of ISIS. I've been involved in uniform since I turned 18, in wearing either a police uniform or a Canadian military uniform and dealing with the direct threats. So the experience that I have gained in dealing with the extremism in Afghanistan and also some of the direct threats that we receive in Canada. We also have to look at the root causes of each problem. Usually the Taliban, ISIS are the symptoms of other situations that allow these groups to grow. In Afghanistan, I can go into many details of how the Taliban actually grew and what caused it and what type of corruption allowed them to garner the support. These groups are small entities, but they garnered that support for some reason. And I had a direct conversation with the former Minister of Defense from Iraq, because ISIS wasn't this one great big organization that crossed the border and started taking land. It was because some of the grievances within the Sunni population that allowed this group to take advantage of those grievances and grow. And that which led to a place where I call it it's a scale of grievances. When it gets to a certain point, you have to use military force, and that's what we have. So one is you have to fight them directly, but if you do not deal with the recruitment aspect of any organization, you will have to continually fight them. So you have to be able to address the recruitment, and that's one thing that I worked very closely with the U.S. on, the previous Secretary of Defense and the new one, General Mattis, who I've known of his efforts, and he knows of the work that I have done, is how do we look at the root cause within in dealing with ISIS? And it's a political issue as well, which something that we've actually been working on and had a significant impact. But the bigger concern is not just dealing with it in Iraq. How do we now start eliminating them and not allowing them to build a network internationally? So that's what we're focusing on. And in terms of your second question, and I know that there's a lot of media questions that popped in, and I just want to be able to ask you a question. Hopefully you're not a journalist either. But on a serious note, if you look at, I've been given many labels throughout my life. And your actions of who you are is judged on by what you do. If you look at my actions, I don't try to be sucked into the internal politics of any one province or any one nation. I can assure you that I've said this publicly in Canada and many other places. I do not promote the breakup of any country. And my goal is to build a relationship as a representative of the Canadian government, and that's what I'm here to do. And I'm also very proud of the fact that I was born here and I get to visit my home as well.
Thank you, sir. Harish, we have a young researcher from Observe Research Foundation.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Harish from the ORF. My question would be, how should the United Nations look at failed nations? Now, failed nations, I mean, it is essential to make attempts to stabilize failed nations because of two reasons primarily. One, because terrorism could be exported to other countries, and the second reason being genocide could happen within the nation. So is there scope for more UN peacekeeping forces to go to the country to stabilize the nation? Talking about South Sudan specifically. Analysts have suggested that the United Nations should intervene and take over the administration, and it should be under international administration for the next 10 to 15 years. Is that possible at all, given the power politics that happen within the United Nations Security Council? Thank you.
No, that's a great question. That question has to be addressed directly. And it's something that I made a key point of looking at myself. We can't, as I stated many times, this is not the peacekeeping of the past. Any conflict that you look at, you can't bring a strategy to a country or a failed state. You have to get a good understanding of what's going on. And I'll be honest with you, and I've said this publicly, we failed to do this when we first went to Afghanistan, had to learn these lessons the hard way. And I made it very clear that when I look at sending our troops into harm's way, we will do a thorough analysis and we will take our time. Because it's better to get it right. Because if you understand and then develop the strategy because of your understanding on the ground, then you have to have an impact. We have to ask ourselves, with certain missions, like for example, the Democratic Republic of Congo, 17 years, I should come on at 18 now, are things progressing? Are we really, when we talk about the protection of civilians, are we doing a good enough job? So each conflict is different. I've been twice into Africa on a fact-finding mission with key experts, and understanding each conflict, not just by country, but also by regions as well. I'm very happy to hear that the conversation of understanding the conflict is moving on. Where we have to take a look at and ask ourselves the hard questions about the root cause. A lot of the times the government itself is part of the problem. We also have to address looking at sometimes we can be part of the problem by insisting that we have to have elections every 4 years. And this is coming from Louise Arbour, who's one of our premier eminent Canadians, who's one of the experts on human rights. In an area where they're not fully developed, sometimes elections also breed violence as well. So we have to have a deep understanding of what is happening on the ground. We have to be mindful that if you're going to have a peace treaty, you're not going to be able to stand in between them. Radical groups are recruiting at the same time. Business communities are not being able to create the jobs for the people. We have to look at the high percentage of the youth that are not being able to work. So we're talking about the recruitment. So putting all this together, I'm happy to say that I have some great conversation with the former Secretary General and the new one and their new leadership that's coming in, and with the allies, especially with the U.S., and how do we look at bringing peace support operations into the new era? And then how do we link this with some of the other operations that we are also conducting? For example, what we're doing in our operations in Iraq are also linked to some of the efforts in Africa. Because as you know, the displacement of fighters and leadership is going into other parts of the world. There's a migrant crisis that's happening from Northern Africa into Europe. So we have to address that question. We don't have the answers yet, but I'll give you a few innovative approaches that we as Canadians were willing to offer up once we decided where we want to go. We know that troop contributing nations at times can be part of the problem. So we're looking at, from our experience, how do we do capacity building? So we're looking at an opportunity where a troop contributing nations, that we will actually do pre-deployment training with the troop contributing nations anywhere up to 3 to 6 months, depending on who we're with. Then actually deploy with them, and similar to what we used to do in Afghanistan, and do mentorship there. So not only you're going to be able to make the mission far more effective, you're actually training potentially an African nation force that's going to be going back to their host nations. So plus you're having an impact on the mission, but now you have a metric that you can measure that'll look at training more people as well. So these are some of the things that we have to address directly, but each area is going to be very unique, and we have to address those issues, and we have to address the radical wings that are recruiting some of the population directly. And one I'll also just mention is, if there's any business folks out there, industry and business in these nations play a critical role. And I've been working with some key industry leaders on how do we look at using business community in developing the strategies that's going to create jobs. At the end of the day, my experience in Afghanistan and anywhere else, a Taliban fighter will choose working in the field or getting money for construction over joining the Taliban, and the same is true in groups like ISIS as well.
Thank you. We have time for a few more questions. So if you can be very, very brief in your questions, comments.
Sir, I'm K. Mahesh. I'm a civil servant. And so you have an extraordinary, you have really great achievements in your life. And India is very proud of you. And your lecture was extremely stimulating. My question is, sir, that in conflicts, should we term killings of people on the basis of ethnicity as genocide? How would you vote, say, as what happened in the Ontario Legislative Assembly, that out of 107 members, 1/3 were present, and they termed the 1984 riots as genocide. So how would you vote in such a resolution belonging to the Liberal Party? Thank you.
I'm not really sure how this relates to conflict. What I'd like to say is that the provincial legislature is a democratic elected provincial body, a private members bill that was put forward. But we, at the federal level, we represent Canada. And in terms of genocide, the word cannot be used lightly. There is a process in place that is that you can go through with the UN that actually gets that recognition when it comes to Rwanda and other places, and that's where I'd like to leave that question. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I'm Janet Chopra. We have one thing in common, Honorable Minister. You're a combat veteran, so am I, except you're much younger, and I'm a platinum veteran of 4 wars. Okay, I want to focus on your heading, Peacekeeping in a Changing World. Peacekeeping was upgraded to peacemaking, worsened rather, and it's worsened further, and it's called peace enforcement. What I want to ask you is that Canada initiated the Peace Building Commission maybe 15 years ago, and I was part of it. We did good work in Rwanda, Sierra Leone. What I want to know is, what about Afghanistan and other disturbed areas? Once they settle down, when you talk to an NGO taking over, why can't the Peace Building Commission, a UN body, be responsible for it? And since you're the defense minister, very quickly, I can't resist asking you. The defense cooperation that the director mentioned, rather nascent between India and Canada. You have technological skills, climate experience that the director talked about. We are operating in Siachen, Ladakh, Northern Himalayas. We can very meaningfully exchange our views on this. And finally, I would request you to explore possibilities during a tenure over here, during a stay over here, why can't we do some manufacturing between private companies of Canada and those in India and make it into an hub? Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. First of all, I want to commend your service, sir, and your experience, and you can tell that you speak from tremendous experience. Yeah, there are many opportunities that we can look at for Afghanistan, and they take many approaches. I don't think Afghanistan is there just yet to take it to that level. There's still a little bit more work that needs to be done. We, as Canada, even though we may not have troops on the ground, we actually provide significant amount of money and resources for the security services, so they can now stand on their 2 feet. Yes, and there are many roles that the UN can play down the road, but they're not there yet. And your second question regarding greater cooperation between defense. Well, sir, this is one of the reasons that I'm here. We're looking, and we are exploring. Had a wonderful conversation today with the finance minister / defense minister, who I'm very envious with. I'd love to be able to be the finance minister and defense minister. So we are looking and exploring some of the opportunities. I have made it a point from last year when I met the former defense minister to move on some of the Cold Warfare training, and we invited members of the Indian military to participate. And it's one of the reasons why there's no secret. I've said this is the second time we're going to have a frigate here to India as well, and the second one will be coming in May. So we do have some great opportunities, but first we need to be able to build this relationship and move forward. And I'm looking forward to this opportunity.
Karunanidhi, I'm a physician from south of India. So it's heartening to see the Ambassador, Harshpant, and Sajjan, both of you, not merely as Indians, but as a truly global citizen of repute. So thanks to Sanjay and Subsoni for bringing these Asians or Indians together to our podium. We hope that India will promote more such, the brain gain for the world is more from Indian brain drain. Okay. Sajjan, yeah. For peacekeeping for Canadians, you are all proud. It's a tradition. And the Canadians' ability to train Asians, India, Pakistan, or Bangladeshis as a peacekeepers is extraordinary. So, as this gentleman rightly said, it is not merely peacekeeping, it is peacemaking. As an individual and as a global politician of you, Justin Trudeau and all, why can't you help us to make peace with our own Pakistanis, Bangladeshis by training our soldiers? I truly hope that you will take up this challenge and bring your Prime Minister here and peace for Asians. All the best. Thank you.
Well, to address the question of peacekeeping, peacemaking, peace enforcement, and as I stated, if you kind of read into the words of what I say, you need to understand conflict first. And so whatever you call it, it is about understanding the conflict and what resources you bring to the table. And what was happening in Afghanistan, we had full-on combat, but at the same time, we're trying to bring stability and peace into an area as well. I've served in Bosnia, where there was peace enforcement directly. And this is why, you can call it a term, I call it peace support operations. But at the end of the day, if you do not get a deep understanding of the conflict itself, you're not going to build the right strategy. So where we will look at and making sure when we deploy, we will have the right number of troops. We will make sure we go in with the robust equipment. But most importantly, we're going to go in with a robust mandate to making sure that our troops have the ability to use force, if necessary, for protect themselves and protect civilians. Regarding the security challenges within this area, I hope that you can actually come to peace sooner, because I'll be honest with you that you can make a far greater contribution to prevent conflict in other parts of the world, and the Indian troops are doing absolute wonderful work in places like when I mentioned I met them in Goma. I was on my way to actually board our aircraft on the airplane, and for security reasons you have to get on, but I just stopped our convoy because it was just very proud for me to be able to thank them and a person who was also born in India, just to be able to shake their hand. And I went up to them not as a defense minister, and they didn't know who I was. And I had a direct conversation Unfortunately, they found out somebody mentioned of the defense minister, all of a sudden that they got in line, and then no one would speak to me after that. But India has a tremendous opportunity of diversity and opportunity to support, and I just wish things would, stability, greater stability could come in this region, so you could put real resources to bringing stability in other parts of the world.
I would like to end with the last word to the lady there in the center, if she can ask a question.
Thank you so much, sir. I'm Stuti Banerjee from the Indian Council of World Affairs. My question to you is, you talk about conflict prevention and peacekeeping, and like you rightly said, the world is changing, and Canada and the UN is looking at how to change peacekeeping in this changing world. But one of the major problems is the budget for this, and the reforms that the UN has to go through to enforce or to ensure that the peacekeeping operations, which generally drag on for a number of years, are able to actually sustain themselves, and you are able to get out of conflict zones, establish peace, and then move on to others. Do you have any ideas on how the UN should reform on this and how the budget for this be reallocated? Thank you so much.
That's a great point and a great question. That's exactly what we in Canada would like to do. For us, getting involved in peace support operations is not a check in the box. I will not recommend sending any Canadian troops into harm's way if they're not going to have a meaningful contribution. I will not do that. And the Prime Minister knows this, and he would not accept any recommendation from me. He takes sending our troops into harm's way extremely seriously. So we need to make sure that when we send our troops, regardless of country, they're going to have a meaningful effort. But the military alone cannot solve a conflict. So we have to be very honest to look at what has driven that conflict. So I've looked at various issues, whether it's South Sudan and the African Union. They're doing, by the way, some great work as well, and what the United Nations can do. We have to look at what the root cause of the problem is. And most of the time, it's the governments themselves, not providing and creating this division between the rich and the poor, and we heard this story many times in many other places. So we have to be able to have a direct conversation within the UN and make the reforms. Troop contributing nations need to be able to provide good troops and not be part of the problem. The sexual violence that has been created by troops, it's beyond unacceptable. This cannot happen. When you have civilians looking out for support, they can't be fearful of the blue beret. Second, we need to make sure that troops, when they provide the resources, that they come with the right equipment as well. Because you don't want to be a drain on the resources. Need the right rules of engagement, so you need the making sure that you have protection of civilians, the right mandate to be able to carry out the mission. The last thing you want to do is send troops into areas with not a clear mandate, and it creates greater frustration. And to be honest, having served and have many soldiers have served, you actually end up creating PTSD when a soldier cannot act in the protection of civilians, creates PTSD. So we've got to make sure they have the rough mandate. Then the final piece to it is we need to have an honest conversation with the political system. We can't just try to do peace support operations within the government structure. We need to have direct conversations, and I won't name a country. When you go to visit a nation and you see the poor and the conflict, and then you go visit the leader in a five-star palace, you can see where the problem is. So we need to have those direct conversations and deal with those. And and I'm happy to say, at the United Nations, we are having those conversations. But what are we going to do about it? We can't overnight have troop contributing nations come in with modern equipment or be trained up to a certain standard. So we need to do something about it. So this is one of the reasons we in Canada are looking at an innovative approach of doing capacity building. We have some tremendous skill there. So we are looking at potentially, this is not, we haven't decided yet, of actually going through a training center or building a training center and have troop contributing nations come and do pre-deployment training with us. Then we deploy and mentor them there. Plus, in Canada, we will not launch a mission that's military alone. We will always launch a mission that's whole of government comprehensive, where you have diplomacy, capacity building, and development funds attached to our mission as well. So we will provide that. Now imagine if other nations, if this works, and I know it will, because from our good experience in other places, if other nations also started to do this. Like I said, we will immediately have an impact on the mission itself. Nations who are providing the troop contributing nations now will actually have troops that will go back that can train others. Then we have to look at dealing with the direct threat. How do we deal with the radical problem? We cannot ignore that radical threat. So it has to be either removed, eliminated, arrested, or whatever it takes. Because you cannot have a free radical in that regime. You need to be able to work with the political system that's going to be able to making sure that the people are going to be able to benefit as well. And finally, you need the political will to be able to push it through. And the United Nations cannot do this alone. We as ministers need to be involved and have direct conversations with those governments. And I'm happy to say that this conversation has started. And I look forward to announcing our peace support operations. And we do need to modernize the system, but it cannot be done without the UN leadership. And I'm happy to say the new Secretary General and their leadership are looking at this directly. Thank you.